Good morning. Nope, not even morning. It just clicked past noon. Hi everyone. So I did all of the watches videos for Patreon. So that means I get to the Marguerite's videos that I'm doing for Patreon friends. You know what time it is, everyone. This is the ninth part of a book called Sunshine. Oh my God. Hi Kitty. How are you? I hope you're doing wonderfully. It has been too long since I made one of these. Like a month-ish. Less than a month, like 3 weeks. Either way, too goddamn long. This is for you. Thank you for getting me into this book. It was so great. When I was at Capricorn this past weekend, I got to talk to people who had read this, and they're like, we're just so excited because it's a well-known book, but not. It's super underrated as well, so I'm excited. So here we go. This is the ninth part. We're doing this. Now I have Hamilton stuck in my head. Okay, so we're doing this. Anyway, I had to get moving quickly, however I was feeling, because it took so much longer to bicycle than to drive into town. But as it turned out, it didn't. When I went round to the shed to fetch Kenny's bike, there was a car parked at the edge of the road, engine off, but soft spotlight on, illuminating the soft insignia on the door, and the face of the man leaning against the hood. Pat. Morning, he said. Oh, shit. We are not going to the lake at this hour, I said, half scandalized and half disbelieving. I'm going to make cinnamon rolls and oatmeal bread and brownies and butter bombs, and you can call it the cavalry at about 10. Sheer. I know you're going in to make cinnamon rolls. I want to be setting some aside to bring with you later on. The only good Monday is a holiday Monday when Charlie's is open. We figured that Mel would bring you home last night, which would leave you with only 2 unmotorized wheels this morning. We don't want you tired this afternoon. Tired, but alive would do, I thought. Dawn isn't for another hour and a half, and if I'm the first person to stake a sucker with a table knife, I could be the first person to get plucked off a bicycle. I had been thinking about this as I walked downstairs in the dark. Living alone has its advantages in terms of warding. Your wards don't get confused, nor do they blunt as fast as they will if there are several of you. A big family with a lot of friends will go through wards like the Sedons through popcorn on Monday nights. And unless you are so fabulously wealthy that you can spend millions on made-to-order wards, there are always going to be some holes in the barrier. Some living alone who isn't constantly having different. Let me do that again. Someone living alone who isn't constantly having different people over can probably build up a pretty good, solid home ward system. That's probably. God, are they going back to the lake? Oops, sorry, this is so exciting. But wards are unstable at best, and they tend to blow up or fall over or go rogue or get their attributes crossed and morph into something else, almost certainly something you don't want, pretty easily. And generally speaking, the more powerful they are, the more likely they are to go nuts. And wards are the sober end of the charm family. Most of the rest of them are a lot worse. One of the most dependable ways to make a ward collie on you is to expect it to travel. All charms, including wards that you wear next to your skin, are different. Hence the perennial, if problematic, popularity of tattoos. But wards you hang at a distance have to stay put. Consequently, the eternally vexed question of warding your means of transportation. And while it's true that the chauffeur-driven limos of the Global Council are almost more ward than limo, it's also true that no council member travels anywhere without a human bodyguard, stiff with technology, including to the corner store for a newspaper. If there are any Global Council members that live in neighborhoods with corner stores, which there probably aren't, the irony is that the best transport ward for us ordinary schlemmels, schlemmules, tricky. Schlemiel. It's a Yiddish word. It's like, how would I describe that word? Unlucky? Schlemiel. That's like unlucky? I don't know. I don't use Yiddish in my thing. I have friends who do, but okay. Anyway, the idea is that the best transport ward for us ordinary schlemiels remains the confusing fact of motion itself. There's a crucial maintenance speed of a little under 10 miles per hour. This is a brisk pedal on your bicycle, and sensible joggers, if this isn't a contradiction in terms, get their exercise during the day. In the horse era, a harness or riding horse that could maintain a 9-mile-per-hour clip for a useful distance was shot. This made horses short-lived and expensive, and most people stayed at home after dark. But at least travel was possible. That is so fascinating. That is so cool. That is one of my favorite things about reading Sunshine, is the way that Robert McKinley reveals the world. And so often it's the narrator revealing it to us and just explaining it like, oh, by the way, this is how this thing works. And it's like in between each of the scenes, she's like, let me give you the context, and now the scene is going to happen, and you'll understand. So the protection of movement is nothing like perfect, which is why they keep trying to create transport wards, but it exists, and thank the gods and angels for it, since without it I don't think there would be many sane humans left. There's only so much constant, relentless, constrictive dread you can live with. Anyway, I knew to be grateful for it, but it had never made much sense, at least not till a vampire had told me it is not the distance that is crucial, but the uniformity, and given me an inkling. But what kind of homogeneity is it about sucker senses? Had the goblin jigglers last sight of the human who often been transmitted anywhere? I'd felt relatively safe inside my apartment. I had good wards, and you can kind of feel like the presence of the screen they put up, and that it's there, and there aren't any big drafts coming through it. And you feel it when you come out from behind it. Behind it too, sorry. But I'd never been able to bear a charm against my skin. They make me a total space cadet. I'd agreed to that keyring loop to make Mom feel good, and that was pushing it. Poor thing. It had probably been grateful to be drowned in the shower last night if it had survived the little incident shortly before. I said to Pat unkindly, "You might have thought of that last night." He grinned and opened the passenger door. I got in. "Why did you draw the short straw?" "'Cause I'm best at going without sleep. My demon blood has its uses." There are at least two classes of demons who didn't sleep at all. My favorite is the Hildy demon, who gets all the sleep it needs during the blinking of its eyes. What? That's amazing! I want that! I like sleeping, but I've never been a big sleeper. What? That's amazing. Anyway, you think this would seriously interrupt any train of thought that takes longer to pursue than the time between one eye blink and another, but not to a Hildy. They're called Hildies after Brunhilde, who slept for a very long time surrounded by fire. Hildies also breathe fire when they're peeved, although they're even-tempered as demon go. What? Yes! This is what I want to be! Hildies aren't blue, though. I certainly couldn't get all the sleep I needed by blinking my eyes. I stayed in the bakery all morning. Charlie and Mel kept everyone who didn't belong behind the counter on the far side. Mom answered more phone calls than usual and said she has nothing to say a lot. With the bakery door open, I could sometimes hear conversations in the office. Mom is good at hanging up on people. It's one of her great assets as a small business manager. She and Consuela had lately been working up a good cop, bad cop routine that was a joy to eavesdrop on. I had no idea what Charlie told her about the events of the night before. I didn't want to know, but he must have told her something. Miraculously, she left me alone, although a particularly lurid new charm was waiting for me on my apron hook that morning. I left it there, glowering to itself. I like orange, but not an over-decorated feather whammies. It wasn't as bad as it might have been by a long shot. I felt some grudging admiration for Soph. Nobody tried to follow me when I left the coffee house at 10, or at least nobody but some of the overweight so-called wildlife that hangs around the pedestrian precinct and tries to cadge handouts from the weak-willed. They know a white bakery bag when they see one, and I was carrying a dozen cinnamon rolls. I swear some of our sparrows are too fat to fly, but the feral cats are too fat to catch them. And the squirrels should have teeny-weeny skateboards to keep their bellies off the ground. One of the recent rumors about Mrs. Bielowski's neighborhood activities was that she ran a commando unit that protected us from some of Old Town's larger, more threatening wildlife, the rats and foxes and mutant deer that never shed their short but pointy horns. What? What? See? Just casually review. There's mutant deer? If Charlie's had to keep all of that lot too fat to intimidate anybody, we'd have gone out of business. Kind of reminds me of the 100. Anyway, it was just Jesse and Pat today. They put me in the front seat of an unmarked car, with Pat alone in the back. Jesse ate 4 cinnamon rolls and Pat ate 5. I didn't think this was humanly possible, but then maybe it wasn't. I ate 1. I'd had breakfast already. Twice. 10 o'clock is a long time from 4 in the morning. We drove first to the old cabin. Oh my God, it's happening! It's happening! I was still clinging to that mysterious sense of someone keeping a protective eye on me, but I was beginning to feel a little rocky nonetheless. Maybe I should have brought the feather whammy instead of hiding it under my apron when I left. As the weed-pocked gravel of what had once been a driveway crunched under my feet, I put my hand in my pocket and closed it around my little knife. I had been not remembering what had happened 2 months ago so emphatically that the edges of my real memory had become a little indistinct. Standing on the ground where it had begun brought it horribly back. I looked at the porch where I hadn't heard them coming from. I looked at the place where my car had no longer been 2 days later. I went down to the marshy reach near the shore, where the stream had run 15 years ago. It didn't look like anybody had been playing there in the mud recently. I went back to the cabin. "Yeah," Pat was saying. "But it's been a long time, and they haven't been back," said Jesse. "They were just standing there. No gizmos in sight, no headsets, no wires, no portable comm screens with flashing lights making beeping noises. I guess it was a technology that was helping them draw their conclusions. What a good thing Pat hadn't walked on my porch this morning, and up my stairs and knocked on my door, and maybe walked into the front room where the same, if savagely stained removed sofa still stood, and the little square of carpet beside it, and maybe even the handle of the fridge door. Same handle that had been there ready to expose a carton of milk behind it if someone pulled on it 2 months ago. What a good thing that good manners dictate that you don't idly cross people's probable outer ward circle and knock on their doors unless invited. Carthaginian hell. We got back in the car and drove on the way we'd been going, north. It was a bad spot almost at once. I picked it up first, or anyway I was the one who said, "Hey, I don't know about you, but I don't want to go any farther this way." "Roll up your window," said Jesse. He hit a couple of buttons on a very peculiar dashboard I was only now noticing, and suddenly there was something like heavy body armor enclosing me, a press of his chainmail and breastplate, and a full face helm, plume, and lady's silk favor optional. I could almost smell the metal polish. "Ugh," I said. "Don't knock it. It works," said Jesse. Our voices echoed peculiarly. We drove very slowly for about a minute, and then a red light on the dashboard blinked, and there was a manic chirping like a parakeet on speed. "Right, we're clear." He hit the same buttons. The invisible armor went away. When you're sitting in the car, that's how the armor? That is amazing. This book is so cool. Okay, hold on a second. "Spartan, isn't it?" said Pat. "No," I said. We drove through 2 more bad spots like that, and I hated the body armor program worse each time. It made me feel trapped. It made me feel as if when I woke up again, I'd be sitting on the edge of a bonfire with a lot of vampires on the other side. It was a long drive, 30 miles or so. I remembered. Then we reached a really bad spot. Jesse hit his buttons again, but this time it really was like being trapped, held down while things slid through the intangible gaps between the incorporeal links, reached out long taloned fingers and grabbed me. Big, huge space, indoors, ceiling up there somewhere. Old factory, scaffolding where the workers had once tended the machines. No windows, enormous square ventilator shafts, vast parasitic humps of silent machinery, contortions of piping like the worm Ouroboros in its death throes, and eyes, staring, their gaze like flung acid, no color. What color is evil? Oh, that's creepy. When I came to, I was screaming. I stopped. Even the guys looked shaken. I could see the scuff marks in the road ahead of us, where Jesse had slammed us into reverse. Good thing the driver hadn't gone under. I put my hands over my mouth. "Sorry," I said. "Nah," said Pat. "If you hadn't been screaming, I'd have had to do it." "What now?" said Jesse. They both looked at me. "Maybe this is the really big bad spot behind the house," I said. "I told you there was one. We're pretty well north of the lake now, aren't we? Seems like we've come far enough, but I keep losing the lake. I keep losing the lake behind the trees." "Yeah," said Jesse. "The road's well back here, because this is where the big estates are. What were?" "Okay," I said. So we walk. I opened the car door and clambered stiffly out. This was harder than would have been if I hadn't been squashed by soft technology 4 times, especially the last time when it didn't work. I patted my stomach as if checking to make sure I was still there. I seemed to be. The cut on my breast was itching like crazy, the sort of variable itch that reinforces its performance by regular nerve-fraying jabs of pain. My jackknife seemed to be trying to burn a hole through its cotton pocket to my leg. I wrapped my hand around it. The heat was presumably illusory, which perhaps explained why the sense of being fried felt so comforting. I set off through the trees without looking behind me. They'd follow, and I had to get myself moving before I thought much about it, or I wouldn't do it at all. What is she going to find? It's so nerve-wracking. I didn't bother trying to figure out where the bad spot ended. I went down to the shore of the lake and turned right. Walking on the shore, while awkward, all shingle and teetery stones and water-tossed rubbish, wasn't so bad as walking through the trees. I was in sunlight out here, and the memories were under the trees. I hadn't walked on the shore before. It was the right bad spot. I came to the house much too soon. I could half convince myself I was enjoying walking by the lake. I like walking by water in the sunshine. I'd often enjoyed walking by this lake before. I stopped, feeling suddenly sick, and waited for the other 2 to catch up with me. "I'm not sure I can do this," I said, and my voice had started to go funny again, as if it had last time, when I told them you don't hear vampires coming. "Oh, excuse me. It's daylight, and we're with you," said Jesse, not unsympathetically. I said abruptly, "What if we get back to the car and it won't start? We'd never get out of those woods before dark." "It'll start," said Pat. "You're okay. Hold on. We're going to walk up the hill toward the house, real slow. You just keep breathing. I'm walking up on your left, Jesse is walking up on your right. We'll go as slow as you want. Hey, Jesse, how's your nephew doing with that puppy he talked her folks into buying him?" It was well done. Puppy stories got me to the stairs. By that time, Pat had me by the elbow because I was gasping like a puffer demon, except they always breathe like that. What the fuck is a puffer demon? What is that? I want to know. Except they always breathe like that, but having a hand on my elbow was too much like having been frog-marched up those stairs the last time I'd been here. No, I said, thanks, but let me go. Last time, I had help. The porch steps creaked under my weight, like last time. Unlike last time, the steps also creaked under the weight of my companions. Ooh. Almost dreamily, I went through the still-ajar front door and left across the huge hall toward the ballroom. It was daylight now, so I could look up and see where the curl of grand staircase became an upstairs corridor lined by what had once been an equally grand balustrade. Balustrade? How do you say that? I've never actually said that word aloud. Balustrade, okay. But some of the posts were cracked or missing. There were still glints of gold paint in the hollows of the carving. In the dark, I hadn't known the railings were anything but smooth. I wouldn't have cared. The ballroom was smaller than I remembered. It was still a big room, much bigger than anything but a ballroom. But in my memory, it had become about the size of a small country, and in fact, it was only a room. As ballrooms go, it probably wasn't even a big one. The chandelier, very shabby in daylight, still had candle stubs in it, and there was a lot of dripped wax on the floor underneath. There was my corner, and the windows on either wall that had bounded my world for 2 long nights and a day in between. I shuddered. Steady, sunshine, said Pat. I had been worrying about the shackles in the walls. I was going to have to revert to not remembering when Pat and Jessie asked me about the second shackle, the one with the ward signs on it. Oh, Christ. There were no shackles, just holes in the walls. I almost laughed. Thanks, Bo, I said silently. You've done me a favor. Pat and Jessie were examining the holes. Pat still half keeping an eye on me. The holes looked like they'd been torn, as if the shackles had been ripped out of the walls by someone in a rage, by some vampire. No human could have done it. But I guess the rage part was accurate. A frustrated, possibly frightened rage. Or on orders? On orders, I thought. I doubted Bo's gang did anything that Bo hadn't told them to do first. But however it had happened, I didn't have to explain a shackle with award signs on it. They did, of course, want to know about the second set of holes. This is where I was, I said, pointing to the holes near the corner. And this? Said Jessie. Oh, kneeling in front of the other holes? I don't remember, I said automatically. There was a silence. Can we have an agreement, maybe, said Pat, that you stop saying, I don't remember, and do us the kindness of telling the truth, which is that you're not going to say what you remember. Shit. There was a longer silence. Pat was still looking at me. I met his eyes. He had held his breath till he turned blue last night. He'd already made up his mind to trust me, even knowing that I was lying about what had happened. That made me feel pretty bad until it occurred to me that there was another angle on last night's demonstration. Not only that Pat and Jessie and Theo were willing to trust me, but that they understood sometimes you had to lie. Okay, I said. So, said Jessie, the second set of holes. I took a deep breath. I'm not going to tell you. Whew. Okay, said Jessie. I think these holes are from another shackle. If it had been empty while you were here, Ray, you wouldn't mind telling us that. So there must have been another prisoner. And it's this other prisoner you aren't going to tell us about. I didn't say anything. Interesting, said Jessie. Pat stared out the windows, frowning. Shackles in a ballroom aren't standard equipment, so the suckers will have put them in special. The thing is, the space cleared around this house had been done recently, too. You have to assume they did that as well. Why? I could keep silent on this one a little more easily. It seemed pretty weird if you didn't know, and this one they couldn't guess. I hoped. They went off to look at the rest of the house. I stayed in the ballroom. I sat on the windowsill nearest my shackle, the one on the long wall, the window I'd peed out of, the window I'd knelt in front of when I'd changed my knife to a key. The lake looked a lot like it had the day I'd been here. Another blue, clear day. It was hotter today, though, summer rather than spring. I leaned back against the side of the window and thought about cinnamon rolls and muffins and brownies and the cherry tarts I'd started experimenting with since Charlie had ordered an electric cherry pitter out of a catalog and gave it to me hopefully. Charlie's idea of post-traumatic shock therapy, a new kitchen gadget. I thought about the pleasure of sitting in bright sunlight, with 2 humans in easy call. Might have opened my collar and let the sun shine there, but I had the gash taped up, and I wasn't going to risk Pat or Jessie seeing it. Will it ever heal? Probably never, right? I thought about the fact that Mel, easygoing, laid-back, mind-your-own-business Mel, kept nagging me to look for a doctor who could do something about it, and found my refusal inexplicable and dumb. Jessie and Pat came back into the ballroom and hunkered down on the floor in front of me in my window. There was silence. I didn't like this. I wanted to leave. I wanted to get away from the lake, from what had happened here. from being reminded of what had happened here. I'd done what they'd asked. I'd found them the house. I didn't want to talk about this stuff anymore. I wanted to go back to the car and make sure it was going to start and get us out of here before sundown. I wanted to sit in the sun somewhere other than beside the lake. So last night, said Jessie. What happened? I said. Pat looked at me and I smiled faintly. I wasn't going to say I don't remember. I was going to say I don't know. It was like instinctive, except who has that kind of instinct? If it was an instinct, it was a really stupid instinct. Except that it worked, Pat said dryly. So you didn't think, aha, there's a sucker a couple streets over. I think I'll go stake the bastard. Never mind that I don't know how. I know it's there, or that I'm going to stake it with a goddamn table knife. No, I said, I didn't think at all. I didn't think from the time I stood up from where I was sitting at the counter to when Jessie had hold of me and was yelling that it was all over. So why did you stand up and pick up a table knife and take off at a speed that wouldn't have shamed an Olympic sprinter? I said, well, I heard him. And I didn't like having him on my ground. I was, angry, I guess. Heard him. Heard him what? Nobody else heard anything. Heard him, giggle. Silence. I think that's the response. Just silence, because they're like, what the fuck? Was this by any chance a sucker from 2 months ago, Pat said gently, from what happened here? Yes. Can you tell us any more? He's the one that made this mark on me, I thought. This slice in my flesh that won't close. You could say I had a score to settle. That doesn't explain why I managed to settle it, though. He was the other one that had hold of me, coming here. I don't know how many of them there were altogether. A dozen, maybe. I thought of the second evening, the 12 of them fanning out around me in the prisoner of the other shackle, coming closer, slowly coming closer. How I'd been pressing myself against the wall so hard that my spine hurt. Most of them didn't say anything. The one I think was the breather. He seemed to be giving the orders. I thought of him as the lieutenant of the raiding party. He talked, and he held one of my arms, bringing me here. The one from last night, he held my other arm. He talked. He was the one with the sense of humor. Her feet are already bleeding, if you like feet. The lieutenant of the raiding party, said Jessie thoughtfully. That sounds like there was a colonel back at headquarters. You'd expect that, a setup as elaborate as this one, said Pat. This is a gang run by a master vampire. Excuse me. They both looked at me. Do you know anything about the master? Said Jessie. I could have said, I'm not going to tell you. I said no. There was another silence. I tried not to squirm. This should be when the softs revert to type and start yelling at me for withholding important information and so on. We have a problem, you see, Sunshine, said Pat at last. Okay, we know you're not telling us everything, but... Well, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but that happens oftener than you might think. People not telling Soph everything. Hell, Soph not telling Soph everything. I mean, aside from the nomad blood of guys like Jessie and me, we could probably live with that if that was all it was. We would like it, maybe. But we've had a lot of practice not being told everything. And if you get too pissed off at people, then they really won't talk to you. But you've done something pretty well unprecedented. Twice. You got away from a bunch of vampires, alone and out in the middle of nowhere. It happens occasionally that a sucker gang gets a little carried away, teasing some kid from a human gang that has been jiving in the wrong place, hoping to see vampires. The kid gets a little cut up, but we take him to the hospital, and I stitch him up, give him his shots, and he goes home good as new, if a little more prone to nightmares than he used to be. It doesn't happen that a young woman, alone in a wilderness, gets away from a sucker gang so determined to keep her that they have her chained to the wall. So far as I know it, it hasn't ever happened before. I wished he would stop saying alone. He hadn't forgotten the second set of holes in the wall any more than I had. Thank the gods at least the telltale shackle itself was gone. And that's only the first thing. The second thing is that you sauntered up to a sucker last night that in the first place you had no way of knowing was there. In the second place, he stood there while you staked him without any warning or any backup, and in the third place staked him with a stainless steel table knife. People have staked suckers without backup, but they've never done it by running up to one in full sight, and they sure as suckers hate daylight don't do it with a goddamn table knife. I pulled the research on it that proves it can't be done last night. Stainless steel is a no-hoper, even if you've had the best ward crafters and charm cutters in the business do their number on it first. I told you I don't need much sleep. I spent the rest of last night going through the files for anything about sucker escapees and unusual stakings. There isn't much, and nothing at all like you, Sunshine. We ought to put all of this in a report and pass it on up the line, and then you get a horde of soft experts down on you like nothing you've ever imagined. And speaking of shackles, you'd probably spend the rest of your life chained to the goddess of pain's desk. She'd love you. But we don't want to, because we need you. We need you in the field. Dear friggin' gods and angels, do we ever need you in the field? We need anything we can get because, frankly, we're losing. You didn't know that, did you? Wait, losing what? The war again? What? At the moment, we still got the news nailed shut, but it isn't going to stay nailed shut. Another 100 years tops, and the suckers are going to be running our show. The wars were just a distraction. We think we won. Well, maybe we did, but we skegged our future doing it. It blows, but it's the way it is. So little grubby guys like me and Jesse feel we need you in the field a hell of a lot more than we need you disappeared into some study program while they try to figure out how you've done what you've done and how they could make it a lot or make a lot of other people do it too. Which they wouldn't be able to because it's going to turn out not to work that way. And we guess you don't want to be disappeared either. I shook my head on a suddenly stiff neck. Yeah, so anyway, if you can off suckers with common household utensils, we want you out there doing it. We'll even lie to the goddess of pain about you to keep you to ourselves, and babe, that takes balls. Would they still want me out there doing what I could do if they knew what else I could do? If they knew the truth about the second shackle? Were the vampires really going to win within the next 100 years? Oh my god, this story's just gotten... Oh, shit. When we got back to the car, it started the first time. Well, that's relieving. There wasn't much conversation. We were most of the way back to town when Pat said, "Hey, Sunshine, talk to us." "What are you thinking?" I'm trying not to think. I stopped. I didn't know if I could say it aloud, even to make my point. I'm trying not to think about those stains on the walls of the alley last night. There was a pause. "I'm sorry," said Jesse. "We do have some idea what we're asking you. Don't let Pat's pleasure in his own rhetoric get to you." "Hey," said Pat, "I haven't been your age in a long time," Jesse went on, "and I grew up wanting to join SOF. I knew it was going to be bad, what I was going to be doing, if I stayed a field agent, which I wanted to be. And it is bad. A lot of it. A lot of the time. You get used to it because you have to. And SOF doesn't throw you in like you've been thrown in. Last night was rough even for a grizzled old vet like me. Ray, we aren't asking you to make a decision to save the world tomorrow. But please think about what Pat said. Think about the fact that we really, really need you. And think, for what it's worth, that we'll back you up to the last gasp if you want us there, if the last gasp up turns out to be necessary. And just by the way, kiddo," said Pat in his mildest voice, "I'm not accusing you of anything, okay? But it must be 50 miles from here back to where you live with that weird Siddhartha type. I ain't saying it's not possible, Sunshine, but that's a hell of a hike for anyone, let alone someone who spent 2 days chained to a wall expecting to die. Thinking your last gasp is pretty worth having." I stared out the window, thinking about the second shackle. This is such a cool develop. What does she become, like honorary saw? How does this work? Anyway, I got through dessert shift that night on autopilot. Nobody asked how my afternoon had gone, and I didn't volunteer anything. The atmosphere of repressed anxiety was thick enough to cut chunks out of and fry. However, I wondered what you'd have on the side with a plate of deep-fried anxiety. Pickles? Coleslaw? Potato strychnine mash? Things were so fraught that Kenny came into the bakery long enough to say, "Hey, big sis," and give me a hug. He hadn't called me big sis since the time he was 8, and I was 18, and I'd caught him spying on my then-boyfriend Raul and me, and he went around the house yelling, "Big sissy, kissy, kissy," and I sent Raul home and went into my brother's room and destroyed the backup disc to every one of their Combox games that I could find, which was a lot. You might think this was overreacting. Mom, Charlie, and Billy did, but I was lucky he'd only caught us kissing, and I wanted to be sure I'd been discouraging enough about this sort of fraternal behavior. Anyway, neither Kenny nor Billy spoke to me at all for about 6 months, by which time I'd graduated, the big sis era was over. Shortly after that, I'd moved into my own apartment. Mary took her break at the bakery again, and told me the latest Mr. Cagney story, but her heart wasn't in it. "I'm okay," I said. "Really?" "I know you are," she said, but she hugged me anyway, and got streaks of flour and cinnamon all down her front. I was due to stay till closing, but they packed me off an hour early. I didn't argue. I fetched the rack and drove home slowly. I was so tired. Bone tired. Marrow tired. What comes after that? Life tired? That's the kind of tired I was. It wasn't just lack of sleep tired, though I did have a few fuzzy cobwebs at the corners of my vision. I could hear some of Mom's charms moving around in the glove compartment. Once a charm has been given someone's name, if that someone doesn't snap it and let it go live, it may pop itself and try to come after you. When I opened the glove compartment and put a new one in now, half a dozen of the old ones tried to climb up my arm. They were probably all totally cracked from driving around in a car, though. It had been dark for 2 hours. The moon was rising. Thought about trying to talk Charlie into keeping the coffee house open 24 hours, drive those inferior primetime brownies right out of town. Then I could never leave the coffee house again for the rest of my life. Pat and Jesse would be disappointed, of course, and we'd have to gear hard after the insomniac market to keep the customer flow up all night long since you can't ward a restaurant. But these were mere practical problems. The thing that really bothered me was that I'd have to tell everyone why. That there was a vampire, a master vampire and his gang, after me. Specifically the ones I'd got away from 2 months ago, and it turns out suckers are poor losers and persistent bastards. That maybe I was the first bad magic wuss in history. The lab coat brigade would probably want to do exhaustive research on my mother's child-rearing techniques as well as on my blood chemistry. Academic prunes would write papers, if they knew, if I lost it, and they found out. Oh, is she gonna join up? What is she gonna do? I genuinely have no idea. It's so exciting. Katie, thank you so much for this. I can't wait to read more. You're the best. Thank you very much.